Trust is the basis for almost everything that we do. It is at the center of our relationships, both personal and professional. It is a part of how we grow and demonstrate our leadership. It helps us to establish and execute company culture and how we are able to connect, communicate, retain, and grow as business people. And I wanted to talk to you about this today because I think it's such an important concept for any professional, any business leader, anyone who is working with people to truly understand. Because when you really start to unpack this and you realize that trust is at the basis for almost everything that we do, or it's the foundation, really, right, for how we've established agreements. It's the foundation for our laws, our contracts. It's the reason that we're willing to exchange one thing for another. Just the fact that we look at that currency in your wallet and agree that is worth $20, let's say, it's because we trust that it is. And I think when you are looking to create great outcomes for yourself and you're looking to get to your next level, both personally and professionally, understanding what are some of the drivers of trust and how you can build trust within your relationships and also how to be aware of how trust can be broken is really an important concept. So we're going to identify a couple of things around that and really I think also identify our own personal strengths and weaknesses as it comes into play when we are looking to establish trust. And so let's start by talking about the three core drivers of trust. Number one is authenticity. Number two is logic. And number three is empathy. If at any time in a relationship, if any one of those three drivers is missing or broken, then trust is automatically not established or trust can be broken. And so let's unpack them each separately. So the first one being authenticity. It's pretty simple. I think it's understanding that people will tend to trust you when they think that you're acting with real authenticity, when you're trying to show up as yourself, when you are not putting on any airs, right? In terms of logic, people will trust your judgment. They will trust that you have some level of competence in the relationship. And then when it comes to empathy, that shows up as really people wanting to know that you care about them, right? So that's how people tend to trust you when they think that you are being your true self and when you are showing up in a very confident and competent way and when they believe that you care about them. And if at any time any one of those things is missing or broken, then trust is broken. And as we talk through this today, I think it's important to understand that if you're in a leadership position or you hope to be in a leadership position one day, that this is capital for a leader, right? It's a currency of leadership because you can't lead people if they don't trust you. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today because I know so many of you who listen to Monday Morning Mojo are really committed to growing and taking your businesses and your personal development to a whole new level. And so trust is really an important part of leadership. And I think that it's about being a modern leader and understanding that leadership is not just expected or given to you because you have a certain position or title. You earn the opportunity and you earn the right to show up as a leader, and you have to earn people's trust. And so I think that some old school thinking around leadership is that I'm the leader. So it's about me, it's about my vision, it's about how I can direct and how I can educate and how I can consult people. But that's not leadership. Leadership is really about who you're leading. And leadership is a commitment to excellence. It's a dedication to wanting to help other people succeed and grow. And when you do, you can not only lead the person, but you can lead people through organizational development and organizational growth. And so through your commitment as a leader who can build trust, you can change things and you can make amazing things happen. And that's why I think this is such a great conversation for us to have today. So, leadership is really about empowering other people as a result of your presence. It's about helping people succeed because of the impact that you can make on them and helping them to see what's possible. And so, your job as a leader or a future leader is to create the kind of environment, to create conditions around you where others can truly succeed and so that other people in your space can reach their full potential. That's what lights me up as a leader. That's what gets me excited. It's probably, again, another reason why I do this podcast is because anything I can put out there that can inspire someone to take action and change their world brings a lot of significance to my world. And that means I'm living out my purpose. And so, as you start to think about how you want to show up in the world and you start to think about how you want to connect and how you want to lead other people, or even just leading yourself, understand that it has to start with trust. And the more trust you build, the more possible it is to expand your potential as a leader. So, in order to maintain and build trust, remember it's about understanding that trust has three drivers: authenticity, logic, and empathy. And when all three of these things are working, then we have great trust. But if at any time any one of those three gets shaky or wobbly, trust is threatened. So, just to review one more time, authenticity is that people feel they're experiencing the real you. And logic, the second part of trust, the second driver, is that they believe that you can do it. They believe that you have the skill set, the competency, the confidence to make decisions, to lead them, lead the organization, to guide them. So, logic is another one of the core drivers of trust. And then the third one, empathy, means that the individual truly believes that you care about them and their well being and that you understand them and that or that you'll seek out ways to understand them. So again, those are the three drivers of trust: authenticity, logic, and empathy. And I think sometimes we don't realize how the information or maybe even the misinformation that we tend to broadcast can undermine our own trustworthiness. And what's worse, stress tends to amplify the problem, causing people to sometimes double down on behaviors that can make others skeptical, and that can start to erode trust unintentionally. So, for example, somebody may unconsciously mask their true selves in a situation where they feel like they have to fit in or adapt, like a job interview or a meeting that might be with people they're not used to spending time with or presenting in front of, right? And so those things can come into play. And so unintentionally, we may put out an image of ourselves that causes others to start to question or scratch their head. And then trust can be broken in that situation too. I'll say I think for the most part, we tend to operate in a pretty stable pattern, and that can keep trust really in a solid place. Our signals can go out that really help establish that feeling of trust. But anytime there's a slight adjustment in our normal behavior, we start to feel like we need to adapt to a situation, then there could be a situation that comes up or a moment created where trust can be broken. And if that happens, then we see that sometimes we find ourselves on a different page with someone, right? Or we're just not connecting, or they're not buying into something that you're trying to deliver. They're not feeling like you really understand them, right? And so when this happens, I think it's important to raise our awareness so we can figure out what usually gets in our way. I presented this topic at one of our leadership meetings, and that's why I thought it would be great to share it with all of you. And when I was doing some of the research, I found this great article that was in the Harvard Business Review. And this individual also presented this topic at a TED Talk, and her name is Frances Fry. And Frances is a leadership coach, she's a psychologist. And what Frances shared in her article is that we tend to have one, what she calls a trust wobble. In other words, when we start to feel like we're making shifts in our behavior, we're thinking that it's time for us to adapt, and we have a situation where trust is broken, there's usually one of the three things that becomes wobbly. So I'll give you an example. For me, I think my wobbler is authenticity. There are times when I'm a people pleaser at heart. If you're familiar with the disc, I'm a high I, which means that I lead with my charismatic personality. I like people. I like to connect with people. And I really put myself out there. And really, 99% of the time, what is what you get. It's a very authentic way for me to connect with people. But if I find that I'm in a situation where I think I need to adapt, sometimes I dial that up even more, or maybe even dial it back. And I start to shift because I'm thinking too much about what other people might expect of me in that situation, in terms of my demeanor, in terms of my energy, in terms of my communication style, in terms of what I want to talk about. And so that might appear to other people like I'm not being my true self. And it could appear that authenticity then becomes my wobbler. And that may be what starts to feel a little off. And so that may be what could lead me to break trust with someone. So the key is for you to figure out what's your wobbler. When you find yourself in those situations, what is it that creates some friction? What is it that you start to shift on? Is it the authenticity piece for you? Or is it logic? In other words, do you get very self conscious about really showing up and being able to use your voice and use your knowledge? So you hold back, and maybe that causes some people to doubt if you have the knowledge or ability in the first place. That could be your wobbler. Or is it empathy? Is it that you become so focused and you become so driven that it appears to other people that you're not considering everyone else around you? And so they feel like you're not seeing them, that you don't care about them or their success. And so empathy could be at risk for you. And that could be your wobbler. So think about that. Which one of those three are your wobblers? Authenticity, logic, or empathy? So in moments when trust is broken, or fails to get any real traction, it's usually the same driver that has gone wobbly for us, either authenticity, empathy, or logic. So we call this driver your trust wobble. That's what Dr. Fry talked about in the article. So, in simple terms, it's the driver that's most likely to fail you. And look, everybody has a trust wobble. And I think to build trust as a leader, we have to figure out what ours is. So, to identify your wobble, think about a recent moment when you had some friction in a conversation or in a relationship where you could agree that maybe that other person felt like they couldn't trust you as much, or you felt that you weren't being trusted as much as you wanted to be. Maybe you lost a listing. Maybe you lost a sale. Maybe someone decided to stop working with you. Within that moment, when you think about it, what changed? What may have been broken? So, with that moment in mind, I'm going to ask you to do something that might be a little challenging or hard. I want you to give the other person in your story the benefit of the doubt. I want you to put yourself in their shoes. And I want you to assume that whatever their reservation was valid and that you were, in fact, the one responsible for the breakdown in trust. Now, this is a great exercise. It can reveal a lot to you if you're willing to actually do the work and be honest with yourself. For instance, I was coaching an agent just the other day, and they were really upset that someone that they had been talking to for several months and had presented the opportunity to list their house a few months ago. And the homeowner indicated that they would like to go with this realtor when the time was right. And now that they feel like it is the moment that they should put their home on the market, they decided to go with another agent. And of course, the individual that I'm coaching was a little upset. And I feel that they were looking to put a lot of blame on the other person. And so I asked some questions around, what do you think really went on? What do you think may have happened? What do you think may have changed? We established whether or not they had stayed in touch. But I think that through the questions and through the awareness that this agent started to have, they were able to get into a healthy dialogue with themselves about maybe what could have shifted and how the other party may have felt skeptical or just uneasy about going through with hiring that person. And listen, if you can look at a situation like that and realize sometimes we win and sometimes we learn, then you can pull out that information to make adjustments in the future and really I think to raise your awareness so you can see when things might be changing within yourself or on the other side of the table, the proverbial table. And so, again, if you had to choose from one of those three trust drivers, authenticity, logic, or empathy, which one do you think tends to be your wobbler? Which one do you think starts to get in your way? If you go back to thinking about your story that I just had you connect with a moment ago, when you look at it, how did the other person start to feel about you? Did they feel that maybe you were representing some part of yourself or the situation? If so, that could be an authenticity wobble. Did the other person feel that maybe you were putting your own interests first? If that's the case, then it's about empathy. Or did they feel that maybe you were too ambitious, too businesslike, you were not giving them all the facts, if you were not presenting yourself and what you're willing to do or how this would unfold, whatever your situation is, in a clear, concise way? Did they have some skepticism about your capabilities to execute or your knowledge? Then logic was the problem. So now that you can figure it out and stand back a little bit, see if that's a pattern that might show up for you. Because if it is, then that's your wobbler. So if you find a pattern happening across multiple conversations or incidents or relationships, then you can quickly understand which is your wobbler. And when you do, then you can start to do the work to understand how to avoid that in the future. Now, I believe that we have the power to change anything. I think we can change the way we think. I think we can change what we do. I think we can change our habits. So, once you identify what your wobbler is, there are ways you can work to overcome it. Now, I will tell you the most common wobbler research has shown is empathy. Most high achieving leaders struggle with this. And I think that signaling a lack of empathy could be a major barrier to becoming a more effective leader. Because if you truly want to empower people, then empathy is a super important skill. And it's something that really has to be front and center. Again, not to ignore the other two. Remember, all three have to be present. But people who struggle with empathy, might be just more analytical or more driven to focus on the facts and they're very logical. And so they can be very fast paced too, which means that they can sometimes be impatient, right? Because they want to move quickly. They're very bottom line oriented. They tend to have a hot and fast paced approach to things, which is great. There's so many positive things about that. But like everything else, there's two sides to the coin. So you've got your positive traits on one side, and then you have some things that you have to be aware of because any strength can become a weakness if it's not managed. If this individual who's really driven and very bottom line oriented, very fast paced, right? If they are so focused that they seem distant or detached, if they're moving so quickly that they become impatient with the world around them, if they are really imposing a lot of expectations on other people, because a lot of times this behavior profile tends to think everyone should act the way they do. So you can start to see where there might be some issues and how it could appear that this person doesn't care about everyone around them. And so empathy becomes their wobbler. And what's important to know about this and what the research showed, without empathy, everything also becomes harder because without empathy, you're not able to take in what's really happening around you through other people's perspectives. And you really can miss some important cues that are going on. And you can find yourself really struggling with interactions and really struggling with being on the same page with the people that you want to lead, let's say in this case. And so, if you think that empathy is your wobbler, just pay close attention to your behavior, especially in group settings. If you can really take a look at, let's say, what happens when you're in a meeting, if you feel like you're losing interest after a short while, right? Because you only have so much of an attention span. If there are certain conversations that you just want to ignore or not really put a lot of time into, in your mind, you might think you're being efficient, but to people around you, it feels like you might be honestly being rude. And so it's important for you to just start to become aware. And this is important to understand too. It may not be your intention and it may not be how you feel, but what we think could certainly be different than what we put out. And so when I say that you're signaling, it's how other people are perceiving you. So again, in this example, this person may be very committed, very bottom line oriented, wants results. They're driven, they're focused, they're trying to manage a lot, right? Their intentions are good, but they don't realize that the energy they're putting out, the response they're getting from other people is different than their intention. And that's what I mean by signaling. So if you're making people feel that the only thing that matters is how you see it and what you want, or that the only thing that matters is you in the situation, you are going to break trust. And when that happens for too long, it can be very difficult to earn the trust back. And I think that's an important thing for us to understand. If this may be something that you're struggling with, a solution to this problem is to really exercise thoughts around, instead of focusing on what you need in a meeting, conversation, situation, how can you work to ensure that everyone else is also getting what they need? And I know this may not be so simple, or let's put it this way, it might be simple to understand, but it may not be so easy to do. It's really about taking some radical responsibility for everyone else in the room too. And for you to have an awareness that you have to be responsible for the way you show up. And something that I say a lot is that we have to take responsibility for the energy we're bringing into the room. And so if you can become really more connected to that, I think that you have an opportunity to be more engaging and you have an opportunity to bring people together in a stronger way and for you to be able to lead in a more effective way. Look, if nothing else, put away your phone. That could be a good way to show people you care and that you're interested. One of my pet peeves is when we're in a meeting, whether it's in person or on Zoom, doesn't matter to me. And I find people with their head down, texting and doing other things because to me, the signal you're putting out is, I don't really want to be here. Or the signal that you're putting out is that I have something else to do that might be more important than whatever you're saying or whatever we're doing at the moment. And it's a challenge. I get it. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of things pulling at us. I'm creating context around the workplace a lot in this episode, but let's be honest, this happens in our personal relationships too, right? You're out to dinner with your partner or your best friend, and they're same thing. Their face is in the phone, right? So I think we have to understand that this is not just relevant to what's happening professionally. This is about any relationship that we have. We could be inadvertently and unintentionally breaking trust with people all the time based on how we're showing up. And that's why I thought it would be so important for us to unpack it. Now, I'm going to move into the other two. If you think that logic is your wobbler, then it's about being honest with yourself that perhaps you may not always be showing up as the most confident person in the room. It may be that you have the knowledge, but you hold back. It might be that you struggle with communication. It might be that you don't have the knowledge, honestly. Let's be real. Maybe there's something that you need to hone up on. There's something that you need to take time to research or learn. See, when logic is the problem, then it's usually about some sort of a hard skill, right? It could be about getting more information, gathering more data, or it could be developing better communication skills. Because what's happening if logic is your wobbler, then the signal that's coming out is that you're not sure. The signal that's coming out is that maybe you're not competent to discuss it, to share, to lead, to teach on whatever is happening. And so, if logic is your wobble, you have to start to look within and ask yourself some questions about your self confidence, about how you can get more comfortable with whatever the facts are, about how you feel about delivering. It's probably about putting in a little bit more effort and starting with yourself about what resources are available to you and how you're using them, because you want to be able to engage people and you want to be able to have them feel like you're able to provide value, provide information, direction. Even in a personal relationship, it's also a way that we just connect and feel like we're relevant to each other. If logic is your wobbler, as I mentioned a minute ago, it could be your struggle with communicating or articulating your thoughts, maybe even breaking down complex thoughts. I think for a lot of people, they have a lot of information here up in their mind, but they're not able to deliver it in a way that can help people chunk it down, understand it. Have you ever met someone who really they know their stuff, but they just can't teach anyone else what they know? So that could be a problem that shows up for people who have logic as their wobbler. And if we're talking about leadership, I will just say too that leadership starts with yourself. You can't really effectively lead other people if you are not able to lead yourself. So leadership begins not when others trust you, but when you trust yourself first. And that could be an issue for an individual who has logic as their wobbler, that they just don't trust themselves enough. And so it could start with that. Okay, let's talk about the last one, authenticity. So I think authenticity can become your wobbler if people feel that they can't gain access to the real you. If you show up in most situations portraying yourself in a way that you think is what's needed versus who you are, then people might think you're not being real or inauthentic. So, this will happen for a lot of people if their personal and professional persona are very different and if you are putting on some sort of mask. I was really honest with you a little while ago. This can be my wobbler. It's gotten better over the years. I've really become very aware of this. And people who struggle, let's say, with imposter syndrome, authenticity is probably most likely your wobbler. Listen, you might be thinking being your real self sounds logical. It makes a lot of sense. It's a great theory. Why wouldn't I be my real self? But most of us tend to struggle with that at certain times or in certain situations. And so, listen, if you might fear that this is your wobbler, then you have to just be honest and start to examine what is creating that. What are your thoughts around your natural strengths and abilities? What are your thoughts about your behavior profile? Can you look in the mirror and say, I really love every part of me and I'm okay letting the world see that? Right. And listen, I just want to say that this is not about being adaptable. I just got that thought. I want to say there are times we have to be adaptable. There are times when, in my experience, I can read a room and know what I have to really do to connect. And so sometimes it is okay to dial it back or dial it up, right? Parts of our behavior profile to feel like you're making the connection. That's another sign of high emotional intelligence when you can be aware of your behavior and how it impacts other people. So I just want to normalize adaption and us doing that. But what we're talking about here is when you really try to hold back your true self, when you are doing things to put some sort of lid on who you are, then you're just not being authentic. And then that's going to cause uneasiness in other people, which will lead to having your trust broken with them. So I think, the cost of inauthenticity is your ability to really lead people, especially diverse teams. Because as I said, the key to being adaptable is that you can read the room and know what adjustments you have to make in order to connect with people. And so as leaders, we want to be able to connect with multiple people. We want to be able to connect with diverse backgrounds. So I just want to make sure we're not confusing these two things, that can be a powerful skill as a leader or a professional, but this is about really feeling like I have to put a lid on who I am and show up in a really different way. And so when that happens, people will definitely feel uneasy. And so I want you to think about, if this is your wobbler, what's driving that for you? What's making you feel like when whoever you are may not be enough in any situation? What's making you feel like you can't reveal your full, beautiful self image and all of the humanity that you are to the world? How can you feel more confident about unleashing more of your true self? So, if you want to develop your authenticity more, I think that it is about obviously developing more self awareness. And I think it's about acceptance. It's about understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, and accepting yourself for who you are. It also might be for you to just think about the things that bring you joy, the things that fulfill you, and understanding that when you connect with those experiences, you're being your authentic self. So it could be doing some journal exercises, meditation, practicing some mindfulness. But I think it's about really going within and asking some questions about who you are, what you enjoy, what brings you fulfillment, because that's going to reveal more of your authentic self. And listen, the world needs you, and you have exactly what you need to start to be on the path to fulfilling your purpose, to making great changes in people and in the world around you. You have the ability to create an impact just by being yourself. And I find that when I try to be anything other than that, I cause so much stress on myself and probably people around me. We break trust. We see how that leads to a breakdown in communication, in our ability to move forward. And so, if this is your wobbler, I'm going to say with a hug that it's time for you to connect with more of your wonderfulness, and for you to own that, and for you to be willing to put that out into the world. So I've referenced leadership a lot today, and it's important for us again to remember that leadership is not about a position or title. And you may or may not have a team of people looking to you for that kind of guidance or direction. It may be that you work as a solopreneur, as I like to call it, or you are working within another team at an organization. Regardless of that, every one of us has the ability to identify our leadership style and develop it. And that will only help us to be better communicators, better partners, personally and professionally. Think about this. If you're a parent, you're a leader. I don't want you to get hung up on that term today and think it doesn't apply to you, because it does. It applies to every person on the planet. And if we want to become better leaders because we want to be better communicators, better influencers, we want to attract opportunities to us, then everything we talked about today is pivotal, because trust is going to be at the core of that. And so, as you think about what we talked about and you're being honest with yourself about your goals, about the things that might get in your way, then it's important for you to know what you want to work on. And as we wrap this up today, I would say just think about how you want to develop more of your skills around communication and listening, how you want to be more aware of other people's feelings and who's in the room with you. How do you want to show up consistently as yourself? How do you want to keep your promises? I think another important thing around being an effective individual in the world today is that you're always examining what's happening, what went well, what may have not worked out so well. And then if it is something that we acknowledge could be done better, different, or maybe even we made a mistake, that we own up to it and we take responsibility for it, because that just means that we're willing to learn from the experience. And I think that there's no greater level of self power than when we allow ourselves to ask ourselves great questions, when we're willing to examine what we're thinking and how we're doing things. I think that puts us in such a great place, because then we bring back our power to know that we're in the driver's seat of our own life, and we can examine these things and we can change and we can make adjustments and we can take responsibility, we can own it, and we can improve at any time. That's what drives me to do this podcast every week. I'm always looking for topics to share with you, to talk to you about, to examine, to research, that gets us thinking, that gets us to stretch the thinking and really challenge ourselves and our own thoughts. So I hope that you got some of that in today's episode. I'm glad you were here, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks again.